everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to our panel discussion and Q&A, Future-Proofing Strategies for Your Business. My name is Christina Struller, and I'm the Vice President of Public Affairs for the Indian subcontinent, Middle East, and Africa at UPS. And I have the pleasure to moderate this virtual panel today. I will do my best to ensure we answer as many questions as possible following the panel discussion. Before we begin, some housekeeping notes. You will receive a brief summary of the event, a short survey, and a link to the recorded version of this discussion following our webinar. The survey will help us to better understand what topics and speakers would be relevant to you and your business. Please use the Q&A function to type in your questions you would like to ask the panelists. Once we get past initial remarks, we will turn to your questions for the remaining time. We will answer as many questions as possible today. If you address a question to a specific speaker, please mention the same when putting the question via the Q&A tool. So please don't be shy, keep those questions coming, and let's get started. Let's try the Q&A function by sharing where you are all located and joining in from. The Q&A function will be used during the webinar to share comments and questions for our speakers. So please, can you try now the Q&A function by telling us where you're joining in from? Let's see if it works. Okay, Veronica, Abu Dhabi, fantastic. Thanks for joining. I see so many names. Bidur from Dubai, Khaled from Brazil. Wow, hello to Brazil. We have somebody from Argentina joining, Dubai. Thank you, Malek, for joining us from Jordan. We have Primo joining us from Dubai, Soraya from Dubai, a lot of people from Dubai. Somebody from Brussels, hello. Maria Louisa, my colleague from Washington, thank you for joining in. We have Rania from Paris. Fantastic. Thank you, Mariam, joining us from Abu Dhabi. Subu from Dubai. Excellent. I'm pretty sure this is going to be an excellent discussion. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. So, okay, great. As we figured out the Q&A function, let's try our poll tool, which we're going to use during the webinar today. Our first poll will be to identify where you're actually working. Are you an entrepreneur? Are you an SME owner or an SME employee? Are you in the capacity of a leadership role or an employee of a large company? So if you can please use the poll. In addition, we would like to know if you are already a SheTrades member. SheTrades Mina. So if you can let us know which capacity you are joining in from and if you're a SheTrades member, which will help us to continue the discussions going forward with different speakers. So I'll give you a couple of more seconds. So SMEs, we really consider companies here in Dubai between 6 to 50 employees. Good. Can we have the results, please? Great. So majority is working either an entrepreneur as well. We have people working for a large company and a couple of SMEs. And I see that majority is not yet a SheTrades MENA member. Great, so I will make sure that we will share with you after the event more information about SheTrades MENA, how to register and how you can be part of this amazing initiative and learn more about the benefits and take full advantage of free e-learning tools and more. To begin today, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Mohammed Kamali, the Deputy CEO of Dubai Exports. Mr. Kamali is a driver behind the SheTrades MENA initiative and Dubai Exports' role in the several joint programs we have been hosting, like this webinar today. Mr. Kamali has over a decade of senior leadership experience in international marketing, trade promotion, as well as experience of policy building across government. He as well participates in joint working groups in the UAE and at the international level with International Trade Center and other international organizations, including the Arab Union for Industrial Exports Development. Mr. Kamali has been instrumental in increasing the value and diversity of exports from the Emirate of Dubai and advancing initiatives aimed to help exporters and manufacturers in the UAE and abroad consider Dubai as an export and re-export hub. Mr. Kamali, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Christina. I would like, first of all, to take this opportunity to thank you in person, actually, for your great efforts with us, the collaboration, the cooperation that you are actually doing with us from UPS perspective. And I would like also to welcome my colleagues in this session, Mr. Ahmad, Mr. Amjad, and Dr. Ashraf. It is actually an honor and a great pleasure to be with you today. It's our pleasure also to continue support this unique program, which is considered to be one of the international platforms that really support women. And I'm glad also to see that, you know, across like 90% of the people who join us today are not a She Trade member, which is, I think, an opportunity for us also in order to recruit them. It's an opportunity for them also to understand what we've been doing so far for this program here. We in Dubai Export had the pleasure earlier to host the She Trade MENA region chapter, where we actually collaborated with you, Christina, and your colleagues from UPS in order to see how we can emphasize more on engaging women into international businesses and etc. And we are continuing our support to this program, despite the fact today we are in a very challenging moments. However, this kind of platforms, this kind of discussion, which I don't think it's going to be only for one time. I'm sure that, you know, after having the good experience today, inshallah, in these sessions, we will be able to organize more and more with you and with APCO and with international also organization who might join us. I mean, today's session is going to be very productive from my perspective. And I think we are talking about strategies of businesses. We've been hearing a lot of conferences that goes into, webinar online that people talks about COVID-19 as a pandemic and what are the solution or what is going to be the strategy towards the future. People started to impose a lot of initiative also that might take place beyond the COVID-19 pandemic as well. I think as far as for us in Dubai and United Arab Emirates, we've been seeing, you know, you've been seeing the level of interaction that the government did in terms of issuing and having a lot of initiative on the place for the businesses and even for the communities. And I don't want to jump into the healthcare side because I'm not that much expert in it, but I think, you know, the government did a tremendous job, which is really allowing us to stay safe today. And the only thing that, which I would like really to conclude my speech with is, I mean, people at the beginning of this pandemic started to think of how we can be healthy and start to protect ourselves, how we can be protected more, how we can be, you know, living in a very good situation, which allow us actually to fight this pandemic and this disease. But I think today the situation actually is more to adopt with this. How today we can stay safe, how today we can still think of how we will do further and what we will be doing further. I think for the past 1.5 months, most of us were in a situation where we wanted to be only healthy. We wanted to stay home. We wanted to make sure that our families are protected very well. But I think now, plus that, we need to think what are the strategies going. I'm talking here about the businesses more than the government employees. From our perspective as a government, we continue creating sort of a platform to help people to go and conduct a business more and more. So, I mean, the question which I would like even to share today and even have some sort of thoughts from my brothers here and also led by you, Christina, is how is going to be the situation, I won't say after the COVID-19, but while we are sitting in our home today, after taking, let's say, for example, the first phase of accepting this COVID-19 pandemic, to be the strategies that everyone will put in mind in order to grow the business. So I would like again to thank you, Christina, and thanks everyone. And I'm really proud and happy to see this level of interaction with the people. And I would like again to thank UPS for organizing and supporting the program. I mean, for the past 2 years with us, and happy also to see APCO, which is one of the most leading, platforms also for PR in order to be engaged with us more. So the floor is yours. I wish you all the best, and we are always looking forward, inshallah, to be safe and to look further toward a better future, inshallah, together. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kamali. And again, thank you for your partnership and support. As you mentioned, the world is slowly reopening after strict lockdowns and restrictions on movement around the world. We have seen a severe economic slowdown and contractions in many countries around the world. The UAE, where I am located, is experiencing the same, and we as well expect a growth contract by around 3.5% for the year. The question is really, how will we survive this challenging time and plan to thrive in an uncertain future? So I'm thrilled today that I'm here with a panel of experts from Dubai Exports, UPS, and APCO Worldwide to help you all on the line develop a business strategy to continue thriving and navigating through the unknowns and new normal. The experts will provide a few points and a practical checklist of key elements to help SMEs and especially your business to have the best chance to survive and succeed. So turning to our main event, with us today we have Imad Lahad, the Global Co-Lead for Digital Practice at APCO Worldwide, who comes with a deep experience in digital content creation and social media marketing in the Middle East, but also around the world. We also have my colleague at UPS based in Brussels, Amgad Shihata, Senior Vice President of International Public Affairs and Strategy, who has led strategic planning, merchant acquisitions, accounting and marketing, as well as leveraging his transportation experience and cross-border knowledge to help develop and launch several new innovative products, policies, and process solutions at UPS. And finally, we have Dr. Ashraf Mahati, the Chief Economist for Trade and Export Market Development at Dubai Exports. Dr. Ashraf provides evidence-based advice that promotes a structured and detailed understanding of trade policy in promoting economic growth, diversification, and development in Dubai and the United Arab Emirates. UPS and Dubai Exports have been working closely together for the past 2 years on SheTrade's MENA, an international trade center-led platform. SheTrade's MENA is part of the Global SheTrades initiative, which aims to connect 3 million women to the market by 2021. SheTrade's MENA provides women with opportunities to scale up their businesses and helps improve economies of countries across the region. We have hosted several interactive capacity building workshops and one-on-one coaching sessions in the past. But given the current situation, we adapted our approach to support SMEs, and therefore we are hosting today our first webinar and hopefully many more in the coming months. Before we are going to learn more about the exporting environment, let's have a quick poll to understand if attendees here are already exporting. Can you share with us if you're already exporting or if you're not exporting? And perhaps you're planning on exporting in the future. If you can just click the relevant point. Great, let's see. Are you exporting? Can we have the results, please? Okay, interesting. So we actually have majority already exporting, and again 25% are planning on exporting. I think this really helps us to steer the conversation now with Dr. Ashraf. So I would like to start with you. We all know the challenges and uncertainty COVID-19 has caused, not only in the UAE, but as well worldwide. There's still so many unknowns, and going forward, as Kamali just mentioned, we have to see how we come over those unknowns and how we can further thrive with our businesses. Can you tell us, Dr. Ashraf, how SMEs can remodel and adjust the business plan and prepare to export in the current economic environment?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christina. I think we all appreciate the enormity of the COVID situation, and this has obviously impacted a number of factors. The IMF predicts that global GDP will fall by 3%. I mean, some of the regions will, of course, have far greater declines in GDP. The EU at -7.5%, US at 6%, UK at 6.5%. Also, global trade is expected to fall. Now, how much is still a bit uncertain. The predictions are from 13% decline to about 32% decline. And we also know some of the sectors that are heavily affected: events, tourism, hospitality, logistics and trade, retail, and wholesale. But we shouldn't forget the sectors that are managing to survive, are managing to carry on their business. And I think this actually raises the important question as to what should companies be doing now, especially SMEs, during the lockdown period, during this period. And I think the first situation, or the first thing they have to do, is to examine their production process. Look at how you're producing your product or your service. What can you do better? What can you do faster? What can you do cheaper? Because when we are busy in our normal day-to-day work, we don't actually have the time to look at our processes, because we're always firefighting. We're always trying to deal with this particular order or that bottleneck. But now we have the luxury of time, and we have to look at our production process. We also have to look at our product, because we have to remember what COVID-19 has done is made us see something. And when we see something, we cannot unsee something. We cannot unsee it. We've seen it. It's in our mind forever now. So our behavior will change. It will certainly change for the foreseeable future. So how relevant is our product? How relevant is our product, not pre-COVID, but how relevant is our product post-COVID? Whenever post-COVID will be, I think that's irrelevant. But the issue is, how relevant will our product be in the foreseeable future? Now, I mentioned something, which was hospitality. When we look at STR, the agency reckons that hospitality is now running at between 8 and 12%. So I would be fair to say that's probably the most hardest hit industry, right? So why don't I use that as an example? And here, I'm delighted when I see an example by Hilton. Hilton is working with Ricket. Ricket manufactures Dettol, the disinfectant, and a range of other products as well. And they're also working with Mayo Clinic. Why? Because they're using the expertise of Ricket in order to relook at their production, at their product or their service in the case of hospitality. They're working with Mayo Clinic to look at how to change their protocols in terms of sanitization, in terms of guest safety. And they're actually rebranding a product, and they're calling it Hilton Stay Care. Now that is an amazing transformation. So when we restart our hospitality, whether it's this year or later this year or next year, it doesn't matter, because Hilton is already ahead of the game. It's created a product that gives you assurance, is able, and when you want to book a room, now you'll think, oh, well, Hilton Stay Care, obviously they're thinking about me. They've taken the COVID situation and they want to look after their guests. So they can actually charge a premium price. So this is how they've taken a product and re-examined it for the relevance of tomorrow. And this is really what we have to do. We have to look at a product or a service and re-examine and see how relevant is it for tomorrow, because that's what really matters. And also, I was very delighted to see 43% of the audience here today, and we have a very, very large audience, actually exporting. You have to look at your export market. What you did before will not work in the future. Things have changed. You have to look at the market dynamics. What are your competitors doing in your export markets? How are they changing their product? How are they changing the delivery mechanisms? How are they changing their prices? What's happened to the consumer in your target market, right? So you have to reassess that. You also have to look at our partnerships. Kamali mentioned that the success of She Trades is due to our partnership with UPS. And I'm very, very privileged and honored when I say this, because when you look at your partnerships, you have to look at what you expect from your partner, right? You also have to look at how you can leverage your partner's expertise to create synergy. So identify what partners you need, identify what are your weaknesses and where partners can come in. Also identify where you can add value to somebody else's business, right? So you have to make an appropriate list of what you need to achieve and how you intend to achieve those. One of the interesting things is that some of the products will not become relevant in the future. However, new products will become relevant. One of the important things is you have to look at your product and your service and see where can you do product extensions, where can you create new revenue generators. I'll give a wonderful example. We have a wonderful company within sheet trades. They make soap, wonderful soap, and I'm sure you've seen this soap everywhere. The COVID situation allowed them to do a product extension. They're now doing hand sanitizers, right? So it's an idea that they're actually using their brand and their expertise and their existing capital to create a new product. Now, this is for soap company. Again, we look at our own product and we see where else can we do extensions? Where else can we find revenue generation? Okay, because remember, the customers have changed, right? They have evolved. So we also need to evolve, okay? And one of the mistakes that we also make in business is that we are focused towards targeting our own generation. So if you look at my white hair, you know, I would be focusing on my generation of Generation X, forgetting the people of today who are the millennials. They're the people who buy online, who read a review before they buy, who are concerned about ethical certifications. Could we make changes in our product to incorporate that? And talking about millennials, the biggest disruption, and my fellow colleagues will talk about this more later, is the distribution channel. Should you change your distribution channel, and how? What should you be looking at? Of course, e-commerce and e-platforms are a very good point. But what are the skill gaps you have? What do you need to reinforce within your organizations to capitalize? What do you need to do to change your product so it meets the new distribution channels? But what is extremely important, each distribution channel has a value add. When I buy from e-commerce platform, there's certain value additions I'm looking for. It could be convenience, it could be price. When I go to a store, I'm looking for certain factors which I don't have on e-commerce platform. So at each point, I'm looking for things that actually help me, right? So I have to look at what are my value generators. Then I have to develop something which is a post-COVID export strategy. Most people go into export, and I see this time and time again, it's really, really depressive. They have a really good product, a really good service, but they're going to the export market without an export plan. You need an export plan. It doesn't need to be a very thick document. It can be one page. It can be a PowerPoint. It can be something that looks at a roadmap. How can you expand overseas if you don't have a map with milestones, with KPIs, with indicators that help you to let you know whether you're on the right track, whether you have reached where you need to reach? I think it's very, very important. And finally, when you're exporting, cash flow is an issue. Always try to secure your accounts receivables. And we have many tools to do that. Your friendly banker, and I know many of you would laugh when I say friendly banker, but your friendly banker should be able to tell you about factoring, invoice discounting, export credit insurance. It's very, very important to secure your accounts receivables. I think I'll stop there and I'll take questions from participants.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ashraf. What we learned and what we heard is it's really particular need to get to know ourselves, our businesses, and what we can do, meaning what are our available resources and capabilities? Is our product still relevant for tomorrow? I think that's a really key point. And turning that situation into identifying new opportunities, really seeing the positive side of, like the example from the soap company, which is important to the audience which is exporting, as you need to identify the demand for what you do and look to see where you can position yourself going forward. That was very insightful, Dr. Ashraf. I'm sure we get several more questions for you after the panel. Transitioning now to my colleague Amgad. Before we hear more from Amgad about digital trade and e-commerce, can you tell us if you're already utilizing e-commerce for your business? Are you already in an e-commerce business? Are you already selling your services and goods online? Can you just answer those questions, please? Great. Let's see the results. Are you already utilizing e-commerce, audience? Okay, fair enough. So I think 42% is already selling online. And then we have as well at least 29% which are going to look into selling online going forward, which tremendously makes sense. As we have seen since the beginning of COVID-19, there was a huge spike in e-commerce. Brands and sellers are venturing online in search of growth, while consumers turn to e-commerce to meet their shopping needs while being at home. I think that's a really relevant point, and I think Amgad can share a little bit more on that. Turning to Amgad and having listened to Mr. Ashraf before, we understand that it's critical for companies to start now than later to develop the post-COVID-19, or better, the new normal export strategies, which must be scalable and sustainable to achieve expected success. How can SMEs and businesses look to take advantage and actually turn those challenging times into opportunity, Amgad? And is there a secret recipe for SMEs to mitigate risks and come out stronger and more successful than before COVID-19?
Thank you, Christina, and thank you, everybody. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak with you. Dr. Ashraf gave us significant context, and I'm just going to zoom down. I have a handful of slides. I did a stint in marketing, and I can't really talk at all without PowerPoint, even to my children. So this is a real quick tour de force of less than 5 slides. But really, I think Dr. Ashraf touched on it, which is all of us were so busy working in our business as SMEs, entrepreneurs, and growing businesses that we weren't working on our business. We've been forced now to really look at working on our business. And I suggest to you tactically some steps here. Go to your employees. I know some of us have rolled back some of our employees and put them on alternate work or through other work programs, but find out 3 key areas of secondary skills from your employees. Those that have abilities to do research, those that have that technology capabilities, and communication and writing skills, because those are the 3 tent poles of strategy needed to kind of pivot a little bit to look at new markets. So in parallel to all the cost deceleration that everybody's doing during this time, I suggest a 3 to 6 month growth plan. Look at your products, step 1, on the internet. See where competitors are competing domestically versus internationally. Is it more difficult internationally to look at your goods online and the cost that they have versus the competitors? Are you leveraging trade agreements? Are you exporting to G20 countries? And there's many reasons for that we could talk about during Q&A, but you have to start with the simple as you accelerate. Are you selling in countries that, you know, are in a steady state? A lot of value chains now, customers and clients and sourcing, they're looking at changing their supply chains. So nothing is in a steady state because they're looking at supply chain risks due to this current situation. So you have opportunity for growth and for sales, but you should also be looking at where you're sourcing, as Dr. Ashraf said. What are your inputs? So it's a 2-sided coin. If I could have the next slide, please. So I tried to simplify it into a 3-step process really here and bucket it: find, ship, and repeat. You know, how do you mine new markets under find? Under demand generation and sales lead, Imad's going to talk to you right now after me in regards to real tools that you could use that are off-the-shelf tools in order to find customers through digital and data mining. Marketplaces are certainly a quick answer. Everybody would go to that. But then there's some other unique opportunities like reverse auctions. Have you looked at the opportunity for government procurement and reverse auctions? Where can you participate in a value chain? If you have an input that's being sourced internationally, can you reverse that and find markets for that input? Ship, obviously, we're using a term interchangeably here, marketplaces and platforms, Marketplaces are really where you could put your goods and it could be sold by a marketplace or on a marketplace or through a marketplace. But platforms are also digital solutions that you could integrate that are integrated into your shopping sites or into your processes to help you bill, ship, or process transparently to your customers. Have you looked at some government opportunities in regards to advanced ruling? It's a bit of a technical issue, but if you are shipping internationally, you really need to know your landed cost. Advanced rulings are government customs administrations that give you what your tariff or duty rates are going to be on the goods coming into your country, so that you have a solid piece of paper or a ruling that says, this is how my good is going to be treated into the country, so that you could create a landed cost and compete versus domestic players. And then last point there, carrier or broker becomes your hub. And that's really not just metaphorically, but really intuitively, because we could become from door to door your relationship. And then lastly, the last bucket of repeat and mitigating risk, there are tools. Why I'm speaking from a UPS standpoint is we have millions of customers every day that are doing similar things, and we learn from them. And as we learn, we develop solutions and processes. The last two there that you see on the slide, Where to Go and UPS e-fulfillment, really allows you to scale appropriately as an SME and an entrepreneur. When you're ready to scale with your own footprint, that's feasible. But how can you leverage in a smart and efficient and cost-effective way a footprint of somebody else? And those two product offerings allow you to leverage somebody else's footprint. So the last slide, please. So we're trying to really shift everybody on this conversation to really think about not working in your business, but on your business, and simplify it in a way to find strategic opportunities, leverage and maximize available technology. Don't try to create yourself at the beginning phase of starting to pivot or starting to grow to new markets. Always think about the customer experience or the consignee experience and make it consistent, because that's going to create the repeat customers. And then leverage the customer expertise, if I could say. And lastly, scale, but scale at the right time. I think one of the last things I'd leave you with is many small and medium-sized companies that I visit who are successful now, the lessons that they gave me is we tried to grow too soon, too quickly, and didn't either pilot or grow in the right markets. So this is your opportunity to really leverage infrastructure and knowledge of others and scale using their infrastructure. Appreciate it, and we'll talk a little bit more at the Q&A. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Amgad. Fantastic. It seems clear that the future economy is digitizing and going online even much quicker than we have expected. Again, thank you, and definitely we're gonna have some more questions from you just in a bit. But before we go to questions, we have Imad. And before we turn to Imad, I would like to raise the last poll for today to find out if your business already has a social media strategy in place or not, or if you're thinking you need one, and perhaps Imad can help you with that. So if you can just let us know if your business already has a social media strategy in place. Let's get the results. Okay, so more than half of the participants already have a social media strategy in place, but still we have 26% which are looking to have one in the near future. I think that's critical. And Imad, if you understand our business and the global opportunities out there, how can we actually capture those? And how can we now use digital presence, especially social media, to stay relevant and to drive our strategy? What are those platforms we must utilize and optimize to reach target customers worldwide? Can you tell us more on that, Imad?
Sure. Thank you, Christina, for the introduction. And Muhammad, thank you for the introduction earlier on as well. As you just mentioned Christina, everyone is looking for digital as a platform to expand their businesses, and Amjad and Dr. Ashraf touched on that as well. But this is what makes it a real challenge right now, because all of us are glued to a screen of one size or the other almost all day long, whether it be through our smart TV that we get access to streaming opportunities, or even browse the internet and other stuff to our laptops or mobile phones. So cutting through that clutter is becoming much more difficult because people are inundated with digital content, whether it be on social or websites and so on and so forth. And we need to be relevant to them in time of abundance of information coming to them. This is why we're looking at this in terms of social and digital, especially in the COVID days, by being, first of all and foremost, being relevant, but not to be perceived as opportunistic. I'm going to talk about this a bit more. How we can, especially for SMEs and entrepreneurs, how you can empower your team members and then empower your customers as well to be creative and helping you in growing your business. This is your base, and starting from that base is very important. Third is how to optimize and look at your existing digital platforms, and if you need to look into new platforms, as people preferences change, their consumption habits are changing, and their habits of going through digital platforms and knowing them is as well changing drastically. Last, why do we need all three? Because one, as Muhammad mentioned at the beginning, as we are trying to absorb the shock, now we're in a phase of coming back or planning our coming back. And it's very important to plan how to come back stronger and not to fall victim to the panic move. Businesses, like we saw it with the consumers going and buying, toilet paper in packs and packs. Same for businesses. You should, we have to cope with whatever is happening, but at the same time, not get carried away by panic and cut all kinds of spending. And this might affect your business and coming as well stronger at the same time. No matter what's the size of your business and what's the size of your spending, that's relative, of course. The first point that I just mentioned is not to be opportunistic. We've seen that so many brands got, hammered online as well because they jumped into like a hashtag or a trending topic, and they just put our content out there to be relevant, but they're not doing anything against that. We saw these campaigns about, clapping the, people working in the front lines and so on and so forth from big brands as well. They did these great videos, great visuals. Maybe it cost them tons of money to do so, but at the same time, they're not doing anything on the side to actually support those. Instead, just they were putting posts and content to carry and to ride on the wave. And people came back and questioned them. This is why we're seeing small and business companies coming back, like these 3D printing shops, for example, that supported frontliners, but at the same time, they sat together, their brains, they crowdsourced solutions for protective masks and so on and so forth. They started it, some people get funds for that. So they changed their business from just doing gimmicks and funny and nice stuff with 3D printing to do actual solutions. And they got funding as well from governments or from associations and so on and so forth. So that's very important to be relevant, to be part of the discussion, and at the same time not being opportunistic. It's very important not to be stagnant at this point in time, but coming out with things that are relevant and make sense to people. At the same time, be genuine. And those, robotic kind of, cliche messaging going out in your communication won't work. People need to be, feel relation, empathy without being excessive in that, and be much more genuine in your communication. In terms of the team, that's your core source as well of innovation. Amjad touched on that briefly, on how you can maximize the skills or the other skills that you have in your team members. How you can help, they help you in creating solutions and products and expanding your product offering. And that might be by giving them more freedom to tap into your clients, talk to them. They worked with you, they know exactly what your product is all about. If they're loyal customers, they will give you ideas on how to make things better. The example that Ashraf mentioned about Hilton and the Dettol, or one of the companies doing the, the disinfectant, and the coordination. And that brings to the second part of it, partnerships, and especially partnering with other small business companies that complement your work. because you don't have budgets, but all three of you or all two of you, if you are a home design company, there's no harm whatsoever to partner with a flower shop as part of your offering and a delivery company at the same time. And you can all, joint in a joint promotion, which will bring value to your customers. And at the same time, you maximize touch points in different places. Activations, whether it be, competitions, what hair salons and gyms are doing for small businesses, giving you these tips on how to cut your hair at home and so on and so forth. You're still relevant for them. And some of them are actually charging, like trainers. They switch their membership, gym membership, from physical to virtual, and they're still charging you. So these ideas come from your audience and they come from your actual team members in doing this. And social media platforms are doing their share as well in one way or the other to support on that. So for example, LinkedIn, they put a range of courses that they have on their platform free of charge for SMEs, whether it be starting with you as an individual to manage this crisis, from managing stress, how to manage your teams better, and so on and so forth, to how to create sales funnels and so on and so forth, how to manage businesses in tough times, protecting your finances, or how to approach potential funds and other budget sources as well. So they did so much in that space, and they're still doing. Instagram recently launched as well a sticker that you can use on Instagram to support local businesses or small businesses. And with that sticker, they get consolidated as well as part of you praising a business or supporting a business. And they're creating a story in their story section, a complete track for this one. And the examples continue. Facebook, they have their own stuff, and Twitter, they have their own stuff. TikTok now, talking about generation, Dr. Ashraf, this is the turning key solution right now. We see even, Gen X and on TikTok as well, if not, let's say, actually posting, they're consuming the content. Because people as well want light content. They want things that will make them laugh. Yes, we're coping with the, the increase in cases or decrease in cases, but at the same time, we want to be much more entertained. And brands are using TikTok as well, being relevant to TikTok and the format to communicate with their audience, whether it be their Gen Z all the way to Gen X. Most importantly, I think Dr. Ashraf tapped on this one, and Amjad, is use this downtime to revisit your digital infrastructure, which means look at your website. There are so many things on your digital checklist you haven't been doing for a while. You wanted to do it, but you're too busy. Checking your website, maybe it needs a facelift. Simple stuff. You wanted to have like a weekly blog where you didn't get the chance to engage with your audiences. That's your time right now. People are still gonna look online for solutions. The most important thing is to clean up, sharpen your pen, and start going into being discovered online by optimizing your search engine results, SEO, by having the right content out there, by engaging the right stakeholders, whether it be your clients or not. At the same time, redefine your audience. If we're redefining our export markets, then we have to redefine and look, who are my new consumer? Online e-commerce, everyone is trying to do online keyword. From the statistic we just saw, half they had e-commerce and the other half are planning to go online. Again, this is more clutter. How can we do it? How are we gonna manage our funnel? Who's our new audience? Maybe I cannot export anymore outside of UAE, but my new export market might be Iraq or might be Sharjah. And how's the supply chain to deliver on that? All of these can be done through re-optimizing your online presence and looking at your social media platforms. The other point I mentioned was the last point before we leave to Q&A is not to go into panic mode and stop spending. And I'll give an example. Still, people are still gonna go on Google search for solutions, whether it's a carpenter, whether it be someone to install a pool in their backyard because they're not going out, and so on and so forth. And you want to be discovered. And that costs micro payments, micro money. Like you can have a budget of $500 and do this a month, or $300, and still you can be discoverable to your own audience and the relevant audience. But stopping everything means your competitors will be top of mind. your competitors will be out there. You're not going to get your fair chance. And this will hinder you coming back stronger. So many brands, if you look at the crisis in 2008 and other crises that came through, brands that kept being top of mind in one way or the other and have relevant solutions, relevant discussions, emerged out of the crisis being much stronger, much more stable, and they learned from it. And digital is not exception to that. We'll leave more to the Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Imad. Fantastic. That was insightful. Thank you very much, Dr. Ashraf, Amgad, and Imgad. And before we take some questions from the audience, I would like to let you know that we will be sharing with everyone on the webinar today the practical takeaway materials from the presentation we just heard. And as well, that's a recorded webinar, so you as well can get the link for that webinar. So now feel free to use the Q&A function to share questions. We will do our very best to answer as many possible in the last 15 minutes, but we already have some questions. Perhaps we start here. So when you put the questions, would be great if you can as well put your name. So here we have one question for Imad. How important is social media advertising to grow an audience online? And if you have any tips to maximize ROI on social media advertising spend? Thank you so much for the question.
It's a very important question. The days of joyride on social media platforms, like when Facebook started, where businesses had these success stories of making millions of followers and business out of that, are over. Social media platforms, they are all public companies almost, and they need the revenue. And they limited to a big extent organic reach, which is the reach without paying any boosting behind your post or content. This is why still spending on social media is very important to get visibility, even to your own followers. Even if you have a page with 100,000 followers, your content will not be seen by them, especially on Facebook and Instagram, if you don't pay micro money behind your post. Saying that doesn't mean it's a generic formula, spend money, you'll get results. It all goes back as well to the content. What I'm putting there, is it interesting to people? Is it relevant? And so on and so forth. Because the more relevant I am, the more my content is engaging and interesting, the more my cost per post or cost per engagement is going to be lower. So eventually my cost of promoting for the same amount of money compared to others will be lower. So this is why it comes back to the core, which is what I'm saying, why I'm saying it, and what I'm offering to people to be relevant.
Thank you. And we actually have here two questions for Dr. Ashraf. Thank you, Ahmed, for the question. Dr. Ashraf, there was a question coming out. What do you mean when you said previously export will change? How will that look like? And as well, one question is if we can still export during this current pandemic.
Thank you, Christina. Now, when I said that exports will change, of course, the pattern of exports will change. And how we export will also change. Because, as I said earlier, we have been through a stage, so now our behaviors will change, right? So when I look at some of the patterns that are already emerging, we find that consumers are looking for products that have a low level of human contact, right? So that's one particular trend that's already emerging. When we look at the kind of products that people are purchasing, there's also a trend towards different types of products. So a lot of these trends are emerging at the moment. And again, this is at the very embryonic stage of what will happen. So in terms of the global pattern, the types of trade, how trade will take place, and who we will take trade with is also emerging, is also changing. One of the important things, for example, and I think Imad and Amjad both discussed it, is the idea that people have more time on the hands. So now they are actually carrying out a lot more trade through online portals, and online portals are still working, they're still delivering, they're still exporting. But that type of trade has different filters. When you trade online, you typically look at a review section, right? And then the portal will typically try to upsell the product and will add on certain things. So by the time you actually end up, it's a different package of goods and services that you're buying. And that also is a different thing. Imad talked about how TikTok and and social media is becoming important. And here, the trade now we see a lot more, especially during the last 8 weeks, is the trade of services is changing. People are now incorporating services within their products, be it remotely or be it virtually, but the service or the intellectual component is taking a greater component of the final product. And your second question, Christina, was?
I think it was linked. So it was the change of exports and if we can still export during the current situation.
You can still export, but again, I think I would always recommend companies here to look at the regulatory body that they have to deal with, because we're living in a very dynamic environment, right? One of my pastimes is to look at the WTO, World Trade Organization website, because on a daily basis, they're actually updating countries that have put an export ban or countries that have placed some type of restriction, right? When we're exporting, we always have to look at not the fact that we can export, but is the country also accepting it? Are the ports in the country operational? Are the logistics in place, right? So I think we always have to look at both sides of trade.
Thank you so much. Fantastic. Amgad, how to identify the right marketplace? So if SME is selling online, should they go for a local marketplace or should they go for a global marketplace?
You know, I think it's a combination of two things, and I'm just going to comment on Dr. Ashraf. Are places open for business? Can we export? My answer is yes, and there's a really good courier that I could advise you to go to called UPS that could help you decide, are there export restrictions? Are there import challenges? That's what we do for a living, world's largest customs broker, world's largest shipping company. So we have people internally that you can come to us and we could help you with that. So secondly, should you sell domestically? Should you sell internationally? That's why I really wanted to start out my presentation by saying, use the secondary skills of your employees. If you're an entrepreneur and have no employees, put on your research hat and really find out what the competition is doing in your country, in your neighborhood, in your region, and internationally. Leverage trade facilitation type agreements or trade agreements that zero out tariffs on your goods or services. Look at taxes as a competitive advantage domestically versus internationally. So there's many components to answer that question, but you need to do your research and you need to leverage social media to help you with that with that end in mind. Thanks.
Great. So we're running almost out of time. So Dr. Ashraf, I will give you now 1 minute to answer the question from Vish Tiwari. How do you foresee GCC consumers evolving? So I think this question really ties up as well nicely. How do you see the businesses? Which one's coming out stronger than before? What are the sectors gonna thrive after that pandemic? 1 minute, Dr. Ashraf.
I'll try to keep it a minute. Okay. The example I gave was the worst affected sector, hotels. If they can take their product, examine the relevance, and come out of it through partnerships, through synergy, to create a new brand called Hilton Stay Care, I believe any sector can. I don't think it's a sector-wise issue. I believe it's a company-wise issue. It's you have to have the vision to take your product, examine it, look, revisit your product, revisit your process, revisit your market, revisit your export strategy, right? Things that you can do now. And again, of course, what Imad and Amjad said, also look at your distribution channels and look at your online portal. It's all about revisiting, refreshing. And the one word I always say to every single SME I advise, always evolve and be relevant. You have to be relevant to your customer to survive.
Thank you. Fantastic, thank you. Imad, how do we choose between social media platforms? Are any more relevant than others? And if you have $1,000 to spend here in the UAE, where would you put the money? Towards which social media channels?
It's a very important question. We get this question very often. It all depends on your product and your audience, especially your audience.
It's an F&B product.
It's an F&B product again as well. And F&B as well, you have to look at who's your end consumer, and then reverse engineer it. And as Dr. Ashraf just mentioned, investigate every step of this, which means the touch points. So if your end consumer is a house, let's say housewife, taking care of X, Y, and Z with a newborn and so on and so forth, you have to look at the platforms that are more relevant to this lady, whether it be blogs, whether it be social media platform, which channel, and so on and so forth. There's no one answer that can, satisfy this question. It all comes back to your audience you want to reach, their purchasing power, and which platform, language. UAE is not one market. UAE is more than 200 nationalities, and you have people that are more on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. It's totally different than being in Jordan or Lebanon or in the UK, where you have, especially in not central cities, where you have a population that have, to some extent, the same consumption habits and thinking. UAE and Dubai and Abu Dhabi, or even the GCC, is a very complex market when it comes to social media platforms.
Okay, thank you. I know we have many more questions lined up there from the audience. Unfortunately, the 1 hour was not enough. This has been terrific. Thank you all for your time and questions. Thank you, the audience, for joining us, and thank you for the panelists. This concludes our event for today. Future-proofing strategies for your business by APCO Worldwide, Dubai Exports, and UPS. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay healthy and stay safe, and see you soon. Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.